what happened over there. But now on to the origins of American linguistics. About the time that Saussure was giving his lectures, a German-born American anthropologist, Franz Boas, later known as the father of American linguistics, was studying Native American cultures and describing their languages. His most famous student was Edward Sapir. A musician and artist, Sapir was deeply interested in uncovering a possible relationship between language and culture, and established a tradition of human language studies, which is still pursued today. Sapir's best-known student and protege was Benjamin Whorf, who carried Sapir's interests even further and formulated the now fabled Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which postulated that the structure of language must, to some extent, determine the way we perceive the world. The structure of English determines the way I perceive the world. Fascinating idea. We'll come back to it. Another pioneer in American linguistics was Leonard Bloomfield, who in his 1933 book, aptly titled Language, presented a carefully articulated approach to the structuralist analysis of languages, much more detailed than Saussure's. And this was the beginning of what was called the American Structural School of Linguistics, the focus of which is to describe the structure of language rather than to explain it. Arguably the most influential American linguist after Bloomfield is Noam Chomsky. In the 1950s, Chomsky introduced a new approach to the structure of language, which he called generative grammar, a fully explicit and mechanical statement of the rules governing the construction of English sentences, how phrases and sentences are put together. He then went on to construct a more powerful type of generative grammar called transformational grammar. I remember studying this when it was new. It's about to come off the table in front of you. When it was new stuff. Well, I thought it was new. And the textbook that we had at NYU was, it was like someone's homegrown publishing. You know, it was on a Smith Corona, and it was, so it was kind of, Anyway, transformational grammar is an approach in which a basic or deep structure is manipulated by a series of transformations to convert it to the desired or surface structure, like taking a deep structure and then converting it to a question. Okay. Here's another example. I won't write it. The sentence is, the police arrested Fred. So by transformations, we can make that passive. Fred was arrested by the police, right? So that's transformational rules, or what he called operations. Chomsky's work explored not only the structure of language, but also set forth theories as to the nature of the human mind as it acquires and processes language. Into the 1970s, Chomsky's theory of transformational grammar was challenged as being too powerful, okay, that it could in principle describe any part of any language at all, and not necessarily distinguish between the truly possible and the possibly impossible in human language. Consequently, Chomsky and his colleagues have modified their ideas a number of times. In those post-World War II years, Chomsky's influence and the renewed interest in the study of linguistics, which resulted, meant that linguistics gained a new status in academia. Linguistics programs popped up all over the place, and many degrees were awarded and careers were sought. Very exciting time in the field, which has since waned to some extent, but not entirely. It's still big. Okay, I still like it. Okay, linguists today often steer clear of the exclusively structuralist approach in favor of a more human-centered approach, which focuses more directly on what people are trying to do when they speak, what they're trying to accomplish. One of the newer ways at looking at linguistics in this way is called the functional notional approach, which examines what purposes are being served by language and what linguistic forms are available to serve those purposes. A major proponent of this approach is British linguist Michael Halliday. But the American linguists are still more focused on the structure. One last new approach that we have is cognitive linguistics, which adopts the opposite view of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. If you remember that, the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis holds that our language at least partly determines how we view the world, right? How we perceive the world. But cognitive linguists say that the way we perceive the world at least partly determines the structure of our language and how we use it. Another fascinating idea. It's always great to see that there's controversy.